You've also got to imagine how popular it is today and how mainstream it is. I'm going to talk a little bit more about how it got there as well. And that's another red flag for me. So like I said, we need to be very careful what we're messing with. So now I've had people say to me before, obviously the concept of astrology came, before some of the Babylonian civilizations. Now, yes, you could say that, but the problem is there's no evidence that's undisputed for that. And there's no evidence to show there was any type of structured kind of, I don't know what the word is for it, but structured routine in terms of with the Hey guys, and welcome back to my YouTube channel. But yeah, sorry if you can hear some TV in the background, but welcome back to my YouTube channel. So today I'm basically doing part one of my series when it comes to New Age and the deceit and each different New Age practice and the history on it and what it's really about. Like I've said in my previous videos, a lot of this New Age spiritualism stuff is rooted in demonic background. It's there for deceit, and I think even when I was doing it before, as I said, I'd never look into the background of what I was doing. I didn't even really know the history of a lot of the things I was doing in this New Age stuff, and I think that's the problem. Without the education, it's hard to know whether what we're doing is right or wrong or where it comes from. So the first episode I'm going to do today is on astrology. So if you're interested to hear more about the background of astrology and why I feel like they're deceiving us with it and it's demonic, keep listening. So the first thing to note about astrology is it has different parts to it, and a lot of what we have in the Western world today comes from a mix of some of the things in the history. So I'm going to go through a little bit of that, because without that we can't have an understanding of where this actually comes from. Again, I'm not an absolute expert in terms of like on certain parts of history, but I have done a fair amount of research, and I don't think it takes a lot of research to realize that something is not coming from somewhere good and it's being used basically for deceit. I think what they're trying to do is get a lot of people involved in witchcraft without knowing, so getting a lot of people doing demonic stuff or worshiping Lucifer without them even knowing, and they've been very successful with doing that through many means, and this is definitely one of them. So yeah, astrology today, we would look at, what we've got today is astrology in terms of horoscopes. So it's the reading of the stars, the planets. You can also use it, obviously people use it for future telling and divination, that kind of stuff. And I just want to talk a little bit more about why I feel like it's bad, why I feel like it's demonic. As we know before, anything that's to do with sorcery is seen as an abomination, and it's demonic and it's not good. We should not be messing with magic or future telling or anything like that. So it's quite obvious already, knowing that astrology is involved in future telling. You can already tell there's something dodgy about it. So that's the first note to point. You've also got to imagine how popular it is today and how mainstream it is. I'm going to talk a little bit more about how it got there as well, and that's another red flag for me. So like I said, we need to be very careful what we're messing with. So now I've had people say to me before, obviously the concept of astrology came, before some of the Babylonian civilizations. Now, yes, you could say that, but the problem is there's no evidence that's undisputed for that, and there's no evidence to show there was any type of structured kind of, I don't know what the word is for it, but structured routine in terms of with astrology. So technically this would be in the second millennium BC. The Babylonians were the first ones to have an organized astrology system. So there were bits and bobs of it before that, but there was never an organized system, and there's never been enough evidence to prove that there was before the Babylonians. Now, the evidence that is out there has often been disputed, and this is the problem. The only one that isn't disputed is the ones from the Babylonians. So that's why I talk a lot more about that, because the rest is a bit iffy. And basically what they did is they would study the stars. So they would use different things, like I can't remember exactly what, but Sagittarius, for instance, would be for war. And they would study the stars and use this to tell future things about the planet. And they actually organized it into something that obviously went towards what we've got today. So they used it to predict things on Earth. Now, most of us have heard of the term Babylon, that kind of stuff. This is why I always say to people, if we're saying Babylon, we know now, if you look back into the history of the Babylons, they were worshipping multiple gods. They'd have like the rain god, this god, that god. They were doing rituals, they were doing sacrifices. If you read in the Bible, we know Babylon was founded by Nimrod. Nimrod's got a very dark past, if anyone knows that story. So we can tell these people weren't following God. They weren't people of God. They were doing a lot of bad, messed up stuff. My question is, why are you practicing their practices? Because, and I don't blame a lot of people. Like I said, it's very easy to be deceived, but this is why we must read. And I fell into this trap myself, so I'm not blaming people. But if we're out here saying, oh, I don't want to be part of the Babylonian system, why are we doing their practices? So look where something comes from and look what those civilizations were doing. You'll soon figure out whether it's good or bad. So look at what they did. So what they did is they developed their own horoscopes. which then actually spread over to the Mediterranean, and it spread over to Egypt. Now, these people, as I said, were not of God, and it says this in the Bible. So this was in the 20th century, where there became more mass media production. So as soon as it started to hit into the 20th century, that's when it started to go global, and that's why I think they're doing this for a reason. Like I said, anything that's pushed mainstream like that, query it. Usually because it's not something good pushing it. So that was in the 20th century that mass media started producing all this stuff about horoscopes and astrology. Now, if we look back into some of it, there were some history of there being lunar cycles inscripted in like bones and caves, and I think this was about 225,000 years ago, if I said that correctly. It was a long time ago, so there are early markings of this, but again, it's not the organized system that was later made. The earliest text to do with this is actually in Mesopotamia, if I've said that right, and this is where you bring in like Sumer, Akkad, the Babylonians. Obviously, there were evidence of them being involved in some of this stuff. A lot of what they were using in terms of this text, two of the things were from what they called, sorry if I pronounce this right, the Venus tablet of Amisadukra. Not the best at pronouncing things. Which was compiled in Babylon. That was about 1700 BC. So they were using these tablets basically. And another showing of early use of astrology was also to do with the Sumerian ruler as well. So there was some use of these concepts to do with like the lunar cycle. So you could see it in there, but the Babylonians were the ones that actually made a proper organized system, which spread over to other places. So moving on, I have to follow my notes here because there's a lot to remember. So I've researched a lot on this stuff. Between 2144 and 2124 BC, this is when it was said from the Babylonians that the gods revealed this stuff to them in a dream. Now, count the gods with the S, because they worship multiple gods. We all know that's paganism. So apparently it came to him in a dream. And there was actually controversy over this was ever generally recorded. So that you query whether that really is the oldest, because people don't actually know. That's why you have to be very careful, because there's a lot of dispute around this. And this would basically mean that the oldest undisputed records of astrology would be in the dynasty of Mesopotamia, which would be modern day Iraq. So that is the earliest undisputed evidence. Now, yes, we could dispute that there were bits before that, but again, there's a lot of arguments over it. The evidence isn't as solid, so it's hard to go off that. Like I said, the Sumerian period has speculation, but this was not considered to be sufficient evidence to demonstrate that they actually had an integrated system with this. I think it got a lot more in detailed and put together as time went on, but I guess some of the theories were still similar to what they used in that system in astrology. So in the 16th century BC, there was a thing called, it was Omen-based astrology, and they called this, again, sorry if I pronounce this right, the Enuma Anu Enlil, and that all comes again from the two main figures of Anunnaki that you see in the front of Disneyland. Basically, the super famous Anunnaki figures that were to do with the Emerald Tablets. Sorry, I always mix the names up, which is super annoying. So it was based to do with that, and it was to do with the cuneiform tablets, basically. So when the Babylonians first started astrology, it was very mundane. It wasn't crazy, it wasn't got loads of divination in it. It was just very simple and kind of boring. It was quite political. That's kind of how it started. Now, the problem is, around the 4th century, this started to basically progress. So the Babylonians actually started to take on some of the things that came from the Omen-based astrology. So it started to get a little bit mixed up, and it started to progress, and they started to add more to it. So this, again, developed in the context of divination, and this is where there starts to become more and more problems. So this was done on the 32 tablets inscribed, and this was, I think they said 1875 BC, and this is the oldest detailed text that's found. Same format as Omen, so you can tell there's a connection between the two. Messages from God, and like I said, think about what they were messing with when they talk about multiple gods, and they believe basically that the gods were present in plants and stars, and again, this goes back to idol worship. People that think we're God, the plants are God. The Babylonians had the same sort of thing when it came to this. Wrong concept. I totally believe it's demonic, ungodly, and that's not how we should think. Things are made by God, they are not God. But this is what the Babylonians would practice on. So a lot of people were still taking on what some of these Babylonians would do in terms of their views like that, which I find a bit crazy. So they basically thought that there were evil omens attached to planets. That's what the Babylonians believed. And this meant that if things weren't going how they thought it would, they thought their gods were angry with them. And because of that, they would do more rituals and more sacrifices. to kind of please the gods or whatever, which obviously is crazy, but they're obviously still doing similar rituals today. And this was also combined with magic. So the Babylonians were messing with magic. Another thing that's obviously sinful. But yeah, that's why I say to people, you know, be careful what we're doing, because the Babylonians did, I can't even, hella dodgy shit. I've watched multiple documentaries on them. They've done it. I can't even tell you. Their sacrifices were so crazy. And a lot of them were like pleased to be killed because they thought they were doing something good. And it never made the problem any better. You'd think maybe they thought, hold on a sec, maybe we're doing the wrong thing. But clearly not. They just kept killing more and more people. It was insane. They'd have like rain gods and all this kind of stuff. So that's why I say to people, why would you want to do these people's practices? Obviously, most people don't know where it comes from, but it's very mainstream today, so people don't actually know the history of it, and I never thought about looking, which is crazy really. But yeah, so this then spread. So if we go back to them 525 BC, this is to do now with Egypt, and this was when the Egyptians were conquered by the Persians. So this is why there's what they call a Mesopotamian influence on Egypt astrology, and there's some crossover. So there's actually kind of a mix. So what we have today and what we call horoscope astrology, which you see in all the magazines and all this kind of stuff, is actually a mixture between Babylonian astrology and what they would call Decanic Egyptian astrology. So it's actually a mixture of the two, and that then equals the horoscope astrology we have today. So again, what were the Egyptians messing with? They were also doing lots of dodgy stuff, worshipping the wrong gods. I think they saw the fallen angels as their gods, because like I said, I don't believe in aliens as a concept. I think they're fallen angels, the Anunnaki, etc. And they saw them as the god. That's what they depicted in the sun god in all of their scriptures and their writings on the walls that a lot of people see today. And again, they were worshipping demonic stuff. And this is where the problems come in. So again, then there was a guy called, again, forgive me if I pronounce it wrong, is it Ptolemy? Ptolemy. Do not know how to pronounce that. So he developed a horoscope system, and this is based on the similar traditions with the stars and all of this kind of stuff. And he actually lived in the Alexandria period in Egypt, and it was actually the Babylonians that went over to places in Europe like Greece and stuff, and they actually taught them their culture, they taught them their astrology. So they were spreading this stuff around and teaching everybody their way of life. So you can see how easily it spread to Europe, how it spread over to Egypt, how things get mixed up along the way. So there's that. They've also deemed astrology as a form of dialogue with the divine. So it was often deemed a lot of that in the Egyptian times as well. And again, what are you communicating with? Often nothing good. Like I said, the people that passed or whatever, they don't communicate down here. So you're not communicating with anything good. And this is what they saw this also as part of. So that's another thing to kind of, you know. But if we want to go right back into history, it's actually the first reference of astrology was from Cato, and that was in 160 BC, and he was the one that consulted with the Chaldeans. But again, there was no kind of like implemented system of what we have with astrology today. It wasn't developed enough for us to get what we have today from it, if that makes sense. But you can tell it was in drips of it was in cultures beforehand, and you can see how it kind of evolved. Last of all, it was then taken up by Islamic scholars. So and this is why I say we have to be so careful after the collapse of Alexandria in the 7th century. So it was then taken up by that. And this is how you can see today how mainstream this stuff really is. And this is why I say, like, when we look at the New Age, which includes like, you know, like I've said before, all like the horoscope stuff, the crystals, the angel books, and doing all readings and tarot and all this kind of stuff, like, you are not messing with anything good, because if this is coming from practices of people that we're saying we don't agree with what they were doing, Babylon, all this kind of stuff, like I said, we should not be practicing what they were doing. And I think having the knowledge of the history of where things come from is so important, because it really gives you an idea of whether something is good or not, or whether we should be doing it. And for me, it's just not worth it. And I think it's so important to self-educate, because I was fooled by this stuff for years. And it's so easy. I'd be more surprised if someone wasn't than was, because it's hard not to be. So I'm not getting at people for being deceived by this stuff. I'm just trying to put out a message to say, like, this stuff isn't good. Please look up. Like, everybody can make their own decision at the end of the day, but I'm like, please do your reading and look stuff up before you mess with it, because this stuff really can be detrimental. Like I said, in the UK, because this stuff is what I would class as white magic type stuff. Like I said, magic is magic. It's all from Lucifer and it's all the same. But in the Western world, they split up into two camps, like I said before, left-hand camp and right-hand camp. And it makes the white magic stuff, even though it's all the same, it makes it look less harmful, like it's okay, like it's not bad. And horoscope comes under that category, but it's deception. And and I think a lot of us need to start to understand that. I think some people like what they're doing, or they base their lifestyle around that. So it's hard to change. But in these times, change is imperative, because Judgment Day be coming, you know, messing with stuff like that. That's why now, like, I've got my horoscope tattooed on me and all this kind of stuff. Obviously I can't do anything about that now, it's there, it is what it is. But I used to read horoscopes all the time. I was proper into it, asking everyone, what star sign are you, what this are you, what that are you, where does this stuff come from? I don't mess with that stuff anymore. When people ask me, I don't even really talk about it anymore, just because I don't really want too much to do with it. Anything that I had to do with horoscopes I chucked out. Obviously, aside from my ink, which can't do a lot about that now, it's on my skin. And I've got my star sign on me, I think, twice. I'm a Scorpio, but I don't really like talk about that stuff anymore. I'm not consumed by it. I don't even really think about it anymore. But yeah, what I'm going to be doing, as I said before, this is going to be a series. I'm going to be doing a New Age series on going through the history of different parts of New Age. And like I said, I've done horoscopes and astrology today. I'm going to do something else the next time, because if I could even help a few people look into these things and learn a bit more about it and maybe change what they're doing, that makes me real happy. Like I said, we've got to be doing God's work out here. We've got to be pushing the message, no matter how unpopular this stuff is. Like, I'm sure it's not going to be a popular opinion, me saying this stuff is bad, especially when you used to be into it and you change and people find it strange, and that's understandable. But like I said, I only talk about this stuff because I care and because I don't want Lucifer to win out here. So, you know, I hope you enjoyed that video, guys. And if anyone else has got any other comments on it, or anything, other articles or things they read or documentaries, please do put them below. I will put in the documentaries below. Hopefully I can find them again, of the Babylonian documentaries that I watched, if anyone's interested. A lot of it, I just read lots of articles online and read parts of books online, but I do love watching documentaries. I do think I learn better that way. So I will put the links below for that as well. If I can find some of the books I read, there's a book, and it literally is called The History of Astrology. It's really good. And it talks all about the Babylonians in there and everything. But yeah, I'm going to put some links below, and let's all work together to not get deceived. But yeah, hopefully I'll see you guys in my next YouTube video.